Welcome back. So, where should we begin? You might wonder, why start a course on the history of Western civilization with prehistory? Historians rely mostly on written records, so why not start with the beginning of writing, about 3,300 before the Common Era? In case you were confused, we live in 2016 of the Common Era, so about 5,000 years ago. A discussion of what little we know about prehistory, meaning the time before writing, will explain the profound changes in human history that have occurred during the last 13,000 years. The 10,000 years before writing are difficult to sort out, but they changed humanity in ways we cannot ignore and still debate. People are still wondering whether civilization, much less Western civilization, has been a good thing. A useful way to think about prehistory is to divide the past into two very, very unequal parts. From about 2 million years ago until around 11,000 before the Common Era, we were becoming human. Then, from about 11,000 before the Common Era until the present, man makes himself. What do you mean becoming human? Around 2 million years ago, tool-making hominids, species of clever primates like our own species, first appeared on Earth. These hominids lived in very small groups and moved frequently in pursuit of wild animals to eat. I would say hunt, but they might very well have eaten a carrion, think Stone Age roadkill, or edible wild plants, possibly the foul weeds that bigger animals ignored. Through natural selection, some of these hominids evolved into the species Homo sapiens sapiens, with their unusually large brains. Nature had made cavemen and women. This occurred in Africa about 200,000 years ago. These early Homo sapiens were practically like us. If you could, as one scholar has suggested, dress them up and put them on a bus, no one could point them out as the cavemen. However, would these cavemen behave in a way so that we would say, yep, they're human? It seems not. How do you know? By the way, this is a question you should never hesitate to ask of anyone. Well, it's not because we haven't found any iPhones. Obviously, we can't know for sure. To quote one scholar, behavior doesn't fossilize, but some behavioral artifacts do. We know that until around 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens did not have a lot of things or make art. They possessed only simple, unadorned stone tools, typically hand axes, which they did not cherish. In other words, they didn't bury them with corpses. Because they did not make, decorate, or preserve many objects, archaeologists and anthropologists argue that prior to 50,000 years ago, these hunting and foraging humans living in small groups were more concerned about their environment than with each other. We even wonder whether or not they were big talkers. They seem to have had language, but may not have been interesting dinner companions. Scholars also imagine that everyone in these small groups was searching for the next carcass or nut tree like it was their job. There was no, write the term down, specialization. Searching for the next carcass or nut tree was everybody's job. From this assumption, experts speculate that members of these groups were more equal than not. The strongest or smartest might lead, but he or she was not too much above the others. This equality was reinforced by the lack of material goods. Owning things has been an important part of setting some humans above others. Fewer things, less inequality. Social scientists describe such a society as lacking stratification. Then, around 40,000 years ago, something changed. Rather than simple stone tools, humans began to produce artfully decorated objects, such as this spear thrower shaped like a mammoth and carved from a reindeer antler. Or this mammoth tusk carved into the shape of swimming reindeer, both from the same cave in France. Scholars believe that the human mind somehow changed. This has been described as the human revolution. Why the human mind changed is fiercely debated. Some suggest genetic changes, others that improved nutrition rewired the mind. The most interesting theory, however, is that the mind changed when humans settled down and formed larger groups. How does living with more people make you smarter? Well, it turns out that humans have developed an exceptional ability. They learn. More importantly, unlike all other animals, they can pass that learning on, not just by demonstrating a behavior. A few other clever animals can do this, but by describing that behavior with symbols, such as language or writing. Skills can be transferred, even improved, from generation to generation. A scientist studying another clever primate, baboons, observed the profound difference this ability can make. A particular troop of baboons were super hunters. They ate meat once a day when led by a particularly clever male. After he died, they were less successful because they had no way of preserving and transferring his skill and knowledge. When humans settled and began to congregate in larger numbers, first in villages and then cities, collective learning intensified. This settling down is called sedentism. Beginning with sedentism, humankind was not so much becoming human anymore. Instead, from here on out, man makes himself. The primary cause of changes in human life became cultural developments rather than biological evolution. Developing an opposable thumb or a bigger brain through evolution might have taken millions of years. Learning the guitar from YouTube? Not quite so long. Why did some people settle down? It seems to have been a combination of the end of the Ice Age around 11,500 before the Common Era and geography. People settled near places where the game and wild edible plants had become particularly abundant. These places were concentrated in a narrow band around the planet that one scholar has described as the lucky latitudes. Humans began to shape their environment in unprecedented ways. They used fire more intensively. They weren't just cooking, but were bringing food to themselves rather than chasing after it. Fire flushed animals for hunters and revealed hidden nests or burrows, like these aboriginals hunting guana lizards. Fire also cleared an area for edible plants that humans could gather. Visit a forest that has been burned, and before the trees recover, you will find edible treats such as mushrooms and raspberries in abundance. You'll also discover other animals attracted to the feast. Watch for bears. Over time, humans in the lucky latitudes moved beyond bringing food to them. They began to produce food. To begin with, they domesticated animals. They sent less than fierce animals out to do the foraging. Mild-mannered cattle could eat the grasses and bitter herbs. Then humans could slaughter the cattle or take some of their blood for food. The ability for adults to drink cow's milk is a later development. Likewise, goats and pigs could eat, well, anything. A similar process of domestication occurred with plants. To begin with, humans cultivated wild edible plants. By cultivation, we mean they improved the environment for the plant. Think weeding and watering. Over time, cultivation gave way to plowing, planting, and irrigation systems. In other words, intensive agriculture. These plants, together with the animals before them, evolved to become dependent on human beings for their reproduction and survival. For example, neither sheep nor corn can survive without humans. This is the common definition of full domestication: dependency. This combination of sedentism, domestication, and agriculture make up what the textbook refers to as the Neolithic Revolution. Despite developing over a few thousand years, the results were truly revolutionary. the human population of the planet soared from an estimated 6 million in 8000 before the Common Era to 50 million in 3000 before the Common Era. This rate of growth was maintained for almost 10,000 years until the even more rapid acceleration during the past 200 years. Take Western civilization too. The lucky latitudes, as one scholar has put it, began looking more and more peculiar. For hundreds of thousands of years, hunter-gatherers had lived in small groups of less than one person per square mile. By 1000 before the Common Era, there were hundreds of farmers per square mile in parts of the lucky latitudes. This kind of crowding into first villages and eventually cities resulted in new ways of organizing relationships between people. Agriculture made life in cities, or civilization, possible. In cities, not everyone is searching for the next carcass or nut tree. There were now many different occupations. There were slaves, peasants, craftsmen, soldiers, priests, and kings. This is called specialization. Write it down. Along with specialization, cities also produced more material goods. More goods, more social inequality. Social scientists describe this as increased social stratification. Living in specialized and stratified cities based on agriculture, including trading in agricultural products like olive oil, wine, wool, sugar, or cotton, is called agrarian civilization. Until the last couple of hundred years, agrarian civilization was the model for human society. Agrarian civilizations were the most advanced, powerful, and populous societies. Who would prefer the uncertain life of a hunter-gatherer out foraging for roots and snails to the security and stability of a farmer producing bread and beef, protected by a king and his army? Aside from being pretty sure where your next meal would come from, civilization had the additional perks of writing, religion, art, literature, and beer. Over time, in Western civilization, any group of people, such as Native Americans, who did not completely abandon hunting and gathering for the blessings of agriculture, might be, for their own good, cajoled or coerced into becoming farmers. And yet, some people continue to have doubts. From at least the 7th century before the Common Era, some writers have wondered whether agrarian civilization is where it all went wrong for humanity. For starters, some scholars have cited archaeological evidence that the transition to agriculture was not all cakes and beer. Farmers worked harder, ate a poorer diet, were sicker and smaller than hunter-gatherers. And then there were those soldiers and kings. Their specialized occupation was war. Given these facts, why would you choose agrarian civilization? For some scholars, the answer is simple. People weren't pulled to the blessings of agriculture, they were pushed. Perhaps people were pushed into agriculture because of increased population. There were just too many people hunting and gathering. Or, according to some writers, rulers pushed people into the drudgery of intensive agriculture in order to better exploit their labor. After being forced into agriculture, some scholars believe these new farmers could not escape agrarian civilization and government. Like the corn in the field or the sheep in the fold, they were dependent upon and managed by their rulers. Ironically, humanity's domestication of animals and plants might also have domesticated men and women. The fact that early rulers described themselves as shepherds of their people is less comforting when seen in this light. Shepherds shear sheep and know something about lamb chops and mutton. Is this whole civilization thing for the best? Is writing, art, and beer worth putting up with soldiers, priests, and kings? We'll come back to this question when we discuss Bronze and Iron Age empires. Okay, this is all interesting to think about, but how could it possibly be related to my everyday life or things that I might control here and now? Well, it doesn't get more personal and everyday than what you eat. A number of people have begun to think about how prehistory and civilization affects their health. Once again, did everything go wrong when humans took up agriculture and began to live in cities? Yes, I'm talking about the Paleo, from Paleolithic Greek for Old Stone Age community. Advocates of the paleo lifestyle point out that for more than 99% of their history, humans have been hunter gatherers. From this, they assume that humans evolved to eat and live like hunter gatherers. Many of the problems of modern humans, from anxiety to childhood obesity and diabetes, result from trying to eat and live in ways that are unnatural for a cave woman. The solution? Get back to paleo. Don't eat domesticated grains or drink milk. Instead, forage on roots, nuts, berries, and meat. Exercise in bursts, just like the cavemen and women out hunting for the next carcass, or being hunted. Yet, remember that idea that man makes himself. Since the advent of sedentism, domestication, and agriculture, human culture has affected our way of life more rapidly and more intensively than biological evolution. Learning the guitar is faster than developing an opposable thumb. A supporter of paleo might say, sure, but our biology is stuck way back before sedentism, probably back when the human revolution occurred 40,000 years ago. We are cave women on the bus. Not so. Evolution has not stopped for any living species, including man. Yeah, but evolution is slow, not always. Indeed, humans are affecting evolution by our ever-increasing capacity to change our environment. Biology and culture are not separate, but act together. It's easy to see this in the plants and animals that we have domesticated. For example, humans have used artificial selection to breed dogs in a dizzying variety of shapes, sizes, and colors during a very short time in evolutionary terms. However, despite their man-made diversity, dogs still belong to the same species as wolves. Wolves and dogs can and do breed. Natural selection has not yet created that fundamental gulf between wolves and dogs, but human selection has made them so remarkably different in appearance and behavior that we think of them as different creatures. But you say, humans are not domesticated animals. The very idea of breeding humans is repugnant. Any changes in our genes must take hundreds of thousands of years. Not so much. Take, for example, the ability to drink milk after infancy. Paleo advocates correctly assert that 40,000 years ago, humans could not drink milk, much less cow's milk, after infancy. Even today, most of the world's population exhibits some form of lactose intolerance. When humans first domesticated cattle 9,000 years ago, the cattle were sources of power for the plow, meat for the table, and blood to drink or eat. Think black pudding. However, since that time, human populations in northern Europe, northern India, and parts of Africa had developed the ability to drink milk. This is the blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. The ability to tolerate milk, a product of natural selection, spread rapidly because humans began to artificially select for that ability. Humans learned. They began to raise more cattle, and people who could drink the milk of those cattle reproduced just a tiny bit more successfully than people who could not. Cavemen couldn't drink milk, but in just a short period after the domestication of cattle, many of us now can. Similarly, rapid adaptations have been seen with regard to other foods, even gluten. Culture and civilization are not just dramatically influencing how we live, they are even tinkering with our caveman biology.